Welcome to Simplify My Small Business. This week, episode 55. I'm worried about starting a business, Adam.
Are you really? Really?
Well, I'm not, but people out there are.
Ooh. What can I hear in the background, Simon Hampson?
We're doing a bit of construction at the office. So last show we had kids in the background. This show we've got drilling.
You see, I was thinking we might just get the birds out the back window here as this nice environmental feel, but you've gone industrial, so it might be an interesting combination of sound in the background.
I actually had birds outside the window when we were going to record last night, so it would have been that would have
been lovely.
Funny thing, but real life.
But I did blow up my oven last night, so we couldn't record.
Yeah. How's the oven going now?
It's not work so well. It's really interesting. So it's my fault. I forgot to turn it off at the source before I opened it up to have a look inside, and shorted something out. So now the grill works, the light works, the clock doesn't work, and the oven doesn't work.
See, if you were a bachelor, that'd be perfect, because all you'd have to do was cheese toasties and you'd be fine.
Yeah, it would be fine. And I'm just looking at why did the thing that we use the most short out? I don't need a clock. I've got clocks everywhere.
Yeah, why do we have a clock on ovens? I just don't think it's really that useful.
Well, it is an old oven, it must be said. This is the time before microwaves, when microwaves were in the kitchen. Anyway, I digress. So that's why we didn't record last night, but no one else will know the difference. See, we didn't even have to tell anyone that.
They might just hear us a bit more upbeat, maybe after our morning coffee.
We're more sprightly.
Hey, I'm now a thinking instructor at Michael Hewitt-Gleeson's School of Thinking as of this week.
What the hell does that mean?
It means I can tell you how to think.
Do I need that? Do I need to know how to think?
No, not really. But hey, Michael's courses are free, and I'd highly recommend going to check out schoolofthinking.org for more. Go to the Simplify My Small Business website for all of you out there, and I'll put a link on this episode, because it's a really interesting series of training via email that he does.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Any news in your world?
Well, apart from blowing up the oven, not really.
That is big news. No,
well, we're making a few significant changes at the gym, just to, I don't know, I always talk about making it a little bit more professional. So just, measuring things and tracking things a little bit better and doing all that fun stuff that takes longer than you want to. I just had a look at my original plan documents, and all the implementation dates were July. Yeah.
We're now October.
It's all right though, because it's another one of those. You've got to allow the actual real world rather than the hoped for world take effect.
Absolutely.
So sometimes dates can be a little bit audacious and they don't come to fruition, but that's all right. So yeah, bunch of cool stuff going on.
Flexible dates. I think that's a whole episode's worth of being flexible. Yeah. So
starting a business.
This week, big decision to start a business. So we wanted to talk this week about some of the things that you can practically do to avoid that anxiety, that worry. I can't tell how many times people have said to me, I want to start a business, but I don't feel like I can, or I want to start a business, but I'm not ready yet. If you've got the idea, you're ready to start the business.
Yeah, well, you've got enough to test if that business idea is viable. That's step number one. I mean, there's no use going out and doing all the whiz-bang stuff, getting your logo, getting your business name, getting all that kind of stuff, if you haven't worked out if that product or service is actually a viable money-making idea.
Exactly. I'm talking more about I don't feel like I've got enough skills to start the business, or I don't feel like I know enough.
Business person kind of.
Yeah. Ultimately, business is a balance between planning and constant learning, and that's partly what Simplify My Small Business is about, isn't it, really? So that's kind of where I'm coming from this week with the episode, I guess.
Yep. Fair enough.
And you and I, we talk a lot about testing ideas and tracking them repeatedly throughout your business, and I think that kind of dovetails nicely into that idea that you don't have to know everything,
Well, you can't.
Exactly.
Not that you don't have to. It's just bloody impossible, isn't it?
So I guess on this episode, we're talking to those of you out there who are worried about starting a business, but we want to transfer that worry or anxiety into specific actions, and that can be a really great way to overcome that sort of stuff. So, we want you to move and change and challenge your ideas about what you can and can't do in your life. So,
and the other thing is, if you haven't ever run a business before or started a business before, you have to treat it as a learning experience. Like the first one, I always talk about the gym, even though I've been in the gym now of fitness industry 6-7 years, I always call this my apprenticeship because I'm still learning more and more stuff within this business. And it will always be, no matter how successful this one becomes, it's still my first apprenticeship in business.
Exactly.
You know, like that's disregarding the fact that I used to mow lawns when I was 12 because I didn't really have business sense about that. That was just like go mow lawn, get cash, go buy stuff.
Exactly.
Not sensible business. But so, like I said when we were just doing the introduction, there's a lot going on in the gym that we probably should have done a long time ago. But you have to learn how to negotiate with your staff, with your partners, with even your customers. You know, and work out the best time to implement stuff.
Yeah, and we sometimes forget, I guess, as we're going through those processes that they're all part of a learning curve and part of accumulated experience that let us do things better in the future. So we've sort of split this episode into 3 parts. Things you need to know, what are the gaps in your knowledge, and what skills do you have that are transferable into whatever business idea you have or whatever role you're moving into if you're thinking about transferring and not starting a business but more transferring to a different industry. So the things you need to know, we've previously covered the who, what, when, why, where, how process, and that was what you and I spoke about at Monash when we were talking about starting a business.
Correct.
So to quickly refresh, these are the 6 questions we think that you should ask yourself when you have an idea for a business or an idea for a new product or service in the business that's already established. So you've got to ask who's going to actually contribute to the startup of your business. Who do you need to surround you with? What sort of team do you need? Do you need, an accountant? Do you need a bookkeeper? Do you need someone to do the marketing for you? Do you need a designer to design product packaging or to design a website? All of those questions are your who's.
Who's going to buy it?
And then you move on to who's going to buy it, don't you? Yeah. So who's your market?
Exactly. Who are you trying to talk to?
Yeah. What's a really interesting question, I think, because it kind of, it really gets you to examine what exactly you want your idea is. Break it down into little bits. Okay, I want to start a business that is mowing people's lawns. Well, what services are you going to offer? Are you going to offer landscaping services, or are you just going to offer to go over to someone's house, charge $50 and mow their lawn and get out of there, and that's it, Yeah,
and there's a lovely, it's a more subtle question here, and it's more like, what am I really providing? Because if we look at mowing lawns, you can look at that as what I'm providing is mowing lawns, but really you are providing a little bit more than that to the person who you're doing the service for. You're providing them with more free time. You're providing them with a more visually attractive environment to live in. So you're doing, you actually potentially making them happier or more comfortable or more content with where they are, giving them a chance to spend more time with their children or their wife or, their husband or significant other, whatever it may be, go out and bowl, who knows? There's a lot more to it than just what is my service. It's like, what is the effect of my service?
Yeah. I mean, we had an absolute jungle out the front of Gosh's office over winter because, so much rain, and got some guys in and got it all pulled out. It's a pleasure to come into the office now. So
yeah, you don't look like you're working in some dodgy little warehouse somewhere in the middle of nowhere, do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have the same kind of thing when I get to the gym. It gets quite weedy, and just where we are in Fitzroy, it's amazing that we're in a bit of a wind tunnel, so there's always leaves everywhere.
Oh yeah, we get
just
that
dry
too.
Leaves, and we're like, we can't even find out where that tree that belongs to those leaves is.
Where does it come from?
Yeah, and it's just like if you get that kind of stuff cleaned up. This is why we keep getting phone calls from companies who want to do cleaning for us.
Yeah.
We don't want to clean. I don't want to clean. I don't want to clean toilets. I don't want to clean the floor in the gym. And we've got people who do that for us, but eventually we will probably go down the path of getting a professional cleaner in.
Sure. And I think every business hits that point where, the owners stop doing it, then maybe sometimes the staff pick it up, but ultimately you see it as something to outsource.
Yeah, and again with that, like if someone starts cleaning my gym, they're not just giving me a clean gym. There's a lot more they give me, so that what question can go a little deeper. When's
an interesting question, because I think, especially with products, there's often a time of year that's good to launch. Maybe it's the Christmas gift giving season. or maybe it's when people are going back to school. Maybe there's a time of year that your product's going to fit into, and your whole timeline needs to be able to shift and change and stay locked on that date as a launch date.
But in terms of getting started, like there's no time like now.
Oh yeah,
it's just like to get the planning done, start talking to people, work out what you have to do to run your business. Maybe find someone to mentor you. That's now. Like there's no use putting that off until the right time.
And I think I was speaking more about the GTD thing, where you'd say, okay, the launch date is the 1st of April, and now for the next 6 months back, I'm going to break it up and say, so this month I need to go and see a business advisor and get their help, creating this, or
we agree there for sure,
or whatever the case is. Yeah. Why are you going into business for yourself?
Yeah, and this is the one we keep harping on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's an important question to us because no one said business is easy. So.
Oh well, no. It's the opposite, I think, most of the time. Yeah. Challenging, not hard, not necessarily difficult, just challenging.
Yeah, and I think it requires compromise, and it requires, a lot of time taken away from other things that you may want to do in your life. So you've got to say, why am I able to offer this piece of the world better than someone else? Why is my idea going to work? All of those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Where? This is an interesting question. Do you even need an office nowadays?
Yeah, where am I going to sell? Am I online? Am I offline? Are we going to drop ship? Am I going to hold stock? Am I just supplying a service that, am I the service? Am I the product?
Drop shipping is actually quite interesting nowadays. For those of you out there who haven't sort of come up against this idea, it's where you maybe sell a product, but someone else fulfills the shipping service for you. I know quite a few people using that sort of option.
Can be reasonably cost effective as well, considering how much time it saves you.
Yeah. The other thing about where is the digital side of things, and I like to talk to people about this. With things like Gmail, hosted apps, Google apps, the things like Amazon and Rackspace and all of those sorts of things. Your files and your website can be hosted anywhere in the world nowadays. You don't have to be physically chained to having a server inside an office and an email host that requires maintenance by an IT guy or girl.
Oh, thank God for that.
Well, yeah, it's
remember
a real
those
freedom.
dark days.
Yeah,
jeez, I remember working in IT and there had to be an IT guy on site all the time. And if something went down, it went down for a long time. There wasn't enough money for the multiple redundancies you can have with like cloud server kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So that where question can extend quite far, I think. And the last question of the 6 is how. So how are you going to implement it? How are you going to fund your startup? How are you going to afford the time if you're still working at another job? How do you get your message out there? How do you sell your product? Those are all important how questions. So what we want you to do is go back and listen to past episodes of Simplify. We've spoken a bit about the 6 questions, the who, what, when, why, where, how, and covered them in a lot more detail than that with actual specifically broken down questions. The second part of the things you need to know, I think, is legislative frameworks around where you're doing business. Especially when you're online, if you're selling overseas, you need to be thinking about what are the laws and the taxation kind of requirements of those countries. We've talked a bit about selling online, and a lot of you out there probably have heard the debate over whether they should be charging GST for purchases under $1,000 for online sales. That's going to have a huge impact on retailers online if they have to start fulfilling those types of demands and going through the sort of taxation burden of anything they sell under $1,000. I mean, you think about all the daily deal sites from overseas and that kind of thing. So,
I think it'd be crazy, but anyway.
Yeah, well, it certainly puts a large burden on business, I think. But you can understand also why local traders are sort of crying foul. So maybe the compromise is to allow local traders some sort of GST exempt threshold. So
yeah, the big problem with GST is it just wasn't applied to everything on day one. Anyway, we'll go down a dark tunnel if we keep talking about that.
That's compromise for you, isn't it? Well, see, I grew up with VAT in the UK. So
Yeah.
I was quite used to the concept of GST. So
There's nothing wrong with the concept. It just needs to be applied as a blanket.
Yeah.
Because then you start getting into why don't we pay GST on that, but we pay GST on this? And
and at the gym, you'd deal with it through selling water, wouldn't you? Because water's exempt from GST.
It's weird, man.
Yeah. Got to set up a different category in your QuickBooks or MyOp.
I don't even know how we operate that, to be quite honest. I think that just it filters down to the accountant and gets sorted out that end.
Yeah, we used to have to deal with it in video stores too, selling food and snacks and beverages.
It's just crazy. Like coconut water, tax it. That's natural, comes out of a plant. Water comes out of a dam somewhere from the sky, blah, 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 blah. And still the same amount of processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, still put in a plastic bottle. I just think it's stupid. Anywho, legislative frameworks, one of the things that's interesting to think about here is if you're opening up an office or a place of business, you need to consider council requirements, local council requirements, and then there's also state law and federal law as well.
Yep.
Look, there's a lot of different things, and quite often, like opening up a certain business, you need permits. You need a lot. You need a. Sometimes you need, what do they call it, a change of business for the particular location that you're in.
Well,
so we opened the gym. Yeah, we had a mixed use warehouse, but we had to change the usage of the building to a fitness centre.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. Even you're like, but it's a mixed usage. Surely I can use this for anything. Well, no, you can't. And then we've just had a cafe, coffee roaster move in to our old warehouse, which is next door to our current facility. And they had to apply to be, they had to put a restaurant in and go through all of the objections from people, like just, it's the most amazing thing. There's most stupid objections you get from people. They're just like, oh, there's a yellow sign up. I need to object to the development of this particular business for no reason. And then they get asked by council why you're objecting, and they don't really have a reason. It gets knocked on the head and it just makes the process go through. It's like,
yeah, it's crazy.
So you have to go through all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can try and be a little bit underhanded and go and open up your business and then get a permit, because the permit takes a while, but you do risk your permit being knocked back, and then you've got a lease and you've got a business that's already started and you're not allowed to run a thing. Yeah. And you've got to go through, or in Victoria you have to go through VCAT and do all that kind of stuff. So you need to get that stuff sorted out really early on. And
then there's the other stuff like, do you want to put a sandwich board on the sidewalk or have chairs and tables on the sidewalk, and you need licenses for that. So
you do. You will get fined, especially in the city of Yarra. You will get fined.
Yes. Been through that.
Permits for everything, and it's just kind of public liability gone mad, really. Like the council's just protecting itself. I mean, you can understand a sandwich board flying through the wind will do some damage to a car or a person.
Yes.
So I suppose there needs to be some kind of restriction there, but it does get a little bit red tapey.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Anyway, got to think about that kind of stuff. So a quick Google search will tell you pretty much what you need to know about
exactly
your industry and your local area.
What gaps are there in your knowledge, Adam? What gaps did you feel like there were in your knowledge when you opened the gym?
Me, my biggest gap was understanding the numbers and understanding how cash flow, profit and loss, and the balance sheet all hung together and clicking together, and how no single one of them gave me all of the picture, gave me a snippet. When you look at them all together, you can understand what's going on. Yeah,
I agree. I think a lot of business owners and people starting businesses would say the same thing, actually.
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely worth knowing, but you can get away with it really early days not understanding the numbers in an in-depth manner. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing. I'm saying you can get away with it. Like if you have an idea for a Muse business where you're going to sell some kind of widget online, and you can simply write down expenses and income just to get an idea of, like, it cost me $100 to put my website up. I've got a free theme. I've written it all myself. It's going to cost me 50 cents per widget. I've bought 100 of them to test it out. Advertising is going to cost me $100 to blah, blah, blah. And this is what's coming in. And you can do all that kind of stuff and work out that starting up this business cost me $500.
Right, exactly.
And if I sell this many widgets, I break even.
Yeah.
And this is where my profit is. But if you want to get really fancy schmancy about it and start upping your marketing budget and employ people and sell different widgets and all that kind of stuff, you need to know the numbers.
Exactly. You need to know that your cash flow is going to be enough at the end of the month to pay the people you employ, for example.
Yeah, and what I found, which is really unfortunate, is a lot of the standard kind of education we get in Australia is not geared to owning a business. In fact, I don't think it's geared to anything, to be quite honest, except for passing tests. So if you are going to start a business, you probably need to read some books. And like there's a series, what is it, Dummy's Guide to Accounting?
Yeah.
It's a really good little book. Accounting for Dummies, I should say, that's right. There's
a good book, a good talk by Ken Robinson on TED from a few years ago about why schools kill creativity. And part of his argument was that the school system was designed during the industrial age, and it was designed to pump out people who would be good middle managers and people who would sort of work for corporations rather than people who would necessarily think for themselves. So,
correct, and it's a big problem right now because we're in an entrepreneurial age, and you need people to think for themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you get taught, you somewhat get taught how to learn, and it's not too hard to train yourself. There's access to all this stuff. I mean, I often wondered to myself whether it was actually worth me having gone to university, but you can't make that decision in hindsight. I do think I've learnt more doing the work and looking for very specific business knowledge that there was a gap, rather than doing a degree in business or a degree in marketing or something like that, because it's just a little bit overblown for what I need. Like, I'm not going to go in and become an advertising executive in a big agency.
Sure.
So I don't need that piece of paper, but I need to have an understanding of how advertising works for small businesses.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm considering going back to do an MBA at some point, but certainly not in it was something that I'd planned to do sort of 5 years out from finishing my degree, which would have been around sort of 2007, but at the time decided that it wasn't relevant. So
I would definitely do it for the sake of interest more than what it would get me. Like, I don't see that an MBA, like, this is just my opinion, I don't see that it would get me much in my business, but I still think there'd be an interesting amount of things that you could learn and different paths that you could take with future study. It'd be interesting.
Exactly. So, all of you out there, have a think about what the gaps are in your knowledge, maybe make a list and start to break them down into areas that you can start learning about is I guess, the message behind it. Take it at small steps, and also realise that there's lots of resources out there, and you can always ask Adam and I questions about where to go to learn that stuff. So, and
there's also the thing that you need to understand, that you already have skills that are going to be transferable into whatever business you're going to do.
Yeah, this is really interesting. This is where the idea for this episode actually came up, because I was talking with someone about the need to see the things you're doing in your current job as transferable. A lot of people's roles, aren't necessarily roles that are going to be there in 10 years' time, and there are new sort of jobs popping up all the time. Like, we talk a lot about the app economy now. The apps for sort of smartphones, and those are jobs that weren't there even 3 years ago.
No, a lot of people are doing some really interesting stuff in apps. They just have an idea, and then they get online, find a virtual staff member who can write the app and say, "Here you go, write this for me." Pop it up on iTunes and start making a whole load of cash.
And I was saying to a few people, there's a real opportunity in that area if you've, say, done your own project and you've proved that you can project manage it, program it, release it. You can then go to a company and say, well, there aren't that many people out there who are doing, or there weren't that many people out there who were doing apps. Hey, I've done it myself, and get a job off the basis of that.
Absolutely. I just always remember this skill transfer thing. Sometimes people have this idea that they don't have the skills they already do. And I remember going to a seminar by a sales coach, a guy who was like, here's how you sell, and he's like, who here is a salesperson? And everyone's like, well, there's a few people put their hands up. Most people are like, not me. And it's like, right, has anyone been on a date? Has anyone been in a job interview? And so everyone raises their hands. He's like, well, so you've all been selling your skills, the reason that you are a good person to get into a relationship with, or a good person to hire. So you're all already selling.
Yeah.
You just need to apply that understanding to a product or a service. And so you may have skills that you don't actually think of as business skills, but they are immediately transferable into what you need for small business.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we shift jobs and roles, we need to get really good at recognising where we can transfer our skills to new challenges.
Correct.
There was a really good article in The Age in Melbourne actually last week called "Computer Says No," and it was looking at the issue of candidates that are applying for jobs being assessed at the first stage by automated computer
Really?
programs. And what they were saying is a lot of employers who are using it are setting parameters that are too tight, and they're almost looking for someone who's already done the job they're looking for before. And what's happening is people who are actually qualified for the role are getting kicked out at that stage because the keywords aren't showing up in their cover letter or their resume. And it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating problem. In a way, the message is, as an employer, you need to look more broadly and say, okay, maybe someone hasn't done this specific role, but they've had 5 years experience in another position that's relevant to this, and I can offer them some training. It's like you and I have spoken about before with the idea of doing a development plan for staff members, you know.
I remember putting out an advertisement for staff on Seek, and I had a really tight level of parameters and just no one was getting through.
Yeah.
I'm like, we've got to widen that net a little bit more.
Absolutely. Whereas I went, with Gosh, we went too far the other way. We went too general at the start of the year and ended up with too many applicants. You know,
that's what I was trying to avoid.
You know, the most obvious example to me is customer service. I think when you think about customer service skills, no one thinks that they're specific to the role that they're doing. Yeah, maybe there's some domain-specific knowledge, like I have to give customer service for this widget, so I need to know all about this widget. But those skills, like you were saying, when you go on a date, you're selling yourself, so you've done sales before. You know, the skills of customer service are transferable ultimately to a different type of product or service. So, you know, take that and then think about what other things you do in your role. Do you use Excel every single day, or have you done a bit of coding online, or are you a good writer? Well, maybe your skills will transfer into copywriting online if you learn about the sorts of things that need to be said or the types of copy that need to be written.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I studied software development, so I was a propeller head programming away all the time, and the programming languages that I've learned are now, well, they're not redundant, but they're old hat. And programming has sort of moved more from the 4GL languages to scripting. But I can still understand how a lot of that hangs together because semantics and syntax are very, very similar.
Absolutely.
And, you know, like you might have an operator, like a symbol might mean a slightly different thing, but that knowledge transfers. So if I get errors in my website, at the moment, I don't bother calling someone to fix it. I just go and have a look myself. Saves me a lot of money, and it doesn't cost me much in time because I know what I'm looking for. So you might make a dramatic shift. I mean, there's not much more of a dramatic shift from software developer, programmer, analyst, programmer to fitness coach. That's a big sea change in terms of a job or an industry even. You know what, it is, but I think there's a really transferable skill that a lot of computer programmers have in that that's really relevant now in business, which is things like Agile and Scrum concepts for running a project or a business. And that whole concept of project management is more and more important. So, yeah. We better wrap this puppy up, Simon. We've been talking for a while. Yeah, quick note. Make sure all of you out there tune into the show in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be looking at finding your niche, and I think it's really relevant to what we've spoken about today. This week's quote from Mark Twain, who incidentally apparently stayed for quite a while in Lucerne, where I was staying last year, for about 2 years, writing. So, interesting guy. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbour, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Mark Twain. That's one of my favourite quotes, that one. I like that a lot. It is a nice one. You have, of course, been listening to Simplify My Small Business with myself, Simon Hampson. And me, Adam Stenecki. Go check out the website, simplifymysmallbusiness.com. There'll be a few links this week. Computer Says No, that article from The Age, a link to School of Thinking, and Accounting for Dummies. Accounting for Dummies, and also the Ken Robinson speech about why schools kill creativity. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Do us a favour. Tell 5 friends about the show and give us a review on iTunes, and we'll love you forever. See you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for listening.